Joining me now in the studio is Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator. Hello, Doug. Now, is this really the case where we've seen this speech being posted on Twitter? Is Donald Trump really being contrite this time around?
Not at all, not in the least. Just the polar dramatic opposite in that. You were very objective and very even-handed in your introduction, the way you presented that, Donald Trump finally acknowledging, conceding defeat. Let's remember the words he was speaking were not his own words. They were words of his advisors who, by all reports and accounts, were literally imploring him, pleading with him, Mr. President, please, we cannot, at this late stage in the game, inflict further damage, stoke goad, incite, make things even worse than they have already been. So this was a speech, a video, if you will, made under, in a sense, duress for Donald Trump. He has not changed his tune. No, he has not had an 11th hour conversion. No, he does not suddenly believe that the American election has integrity and that the vote was free and fair, as all of the courts and all of the government and the election officials have attested to. Quite the contrary, he sticks very firmly to his belief that it was an unfair election. Watch that space, because it is one that he is likely to expound, and it will become his leitmotif, his main slogan once he's out of office and trying to cling on to his base. What he did do is he did the very bare minimum, which is to at least try to steady the ship with his rhetoric, giving in to his aides. But like I said, it was a real rolling a boulder up the hill act for his aides, because at least in the initial moments when the Capitol itself was being stormed, the reports were that Donald Trump was actually almost giddy about it, was actually reveling in it, was actually encouraging them. And only later, in subsequent words, did he say that he condemned the mayhem and the chaos. All of this, this is me speaking editorially, but when Donald Trump suddenly sounds mature, when he sounds balanced, when he sounds like an adult, it's not Donald Trump. It's his speechwriters writing something for him. And usually you could probably guess after a long knockdown, kickdown battle within a small room in the White House.
It was certainly interesting watching his body language as he read out those words.
Yes.
Now, what is the likelihood at this point in time of the 25th Amendment being invoked?
Almost none. Formally invoked, almost none. We know that there have been these preliminary conversations in various quarters. It was first talked about among Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee. It's been broached by a Republican who's gotten a lot of headlines in recent days, Adam Kinzinger. And it's also some of his aides in private, and some former Republicans, party members, have said, yeah, if ever there was a time to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would discharge a president of his powers, if that president is deemed incapable or incapacitated physically or mentally, yeah, you invoke the 25th. It's not going to happen because what do you need? The clause they're talking about is Clause 4 in this amendment. It means you need the vice president, Mike Pence, plus a majority of cabinet members. Now, we've seen a succession of cabinet members resigning in the past 48 hours. 2 of them are gone. So the circle of cabinet members is narrowing. That already makes that majority number a little more difficult. It dilutes the number you need. But Mike Pence himself, and this is perhaps more significant, he says he is not inclined in any way, shape, or form to invoke the 25th Amendment. So game over on that one. Does that mean the Democrats might not go ahead, as Nancy Pelosi has said, saying if the 25th isn't invoked, we will impeach a second time? They believe that absolutely a president who's broken the laws, violated his oath, committed so-called impeachable offenses, should be impeached, even if there's only 12 days left in his term.
And of course, America is now in shock, given what it witnessed on Wednesday. And of course, many, many questions have been asked about those extraordinary security breaches that we witnessed as those supporters stormed into the building.
Extraordinary. Annette, you use the word extraordinary. I'm going to sort of raise you one. It is hyper extraordinary in the sense that you have not had the security perimeters, the walls of the Capitol, the building, being breached, being violated in that way, really since the War of 1812 in the United States. We're going back a little, right, to over 200 years. It was a total breakdown in security. And the worst part about it, is Everyone knew it was coming. It was flagged in advance. It was flagged by the President of the United States himself. So this was something about which people were forewarned, raising a lot of questions. What was the now resigned Sergeant of Arms of the House doing? The chief of the Washington, D.C. Capitol Police, who stepped in to intervene to help out the overwhelmed forces of the Capitol itself. What were they all doing? Why weren't they better positioned? Why weren't they better prepared? The critics will say, and some people say they're being cynical in saying it, that because it was a white mob of extremists, even though many of them were said to be bearing arms, they were given a much more free rein than they would have if they were a darker skin rampaging through the U.S.'s key central institution of democracy.
And just as a footnote to that, both you and I as working journalists have been in that building, haven't we?
Absolutely.
And we know how tight the security can be just for working members of the media.
You're pushed back if you take a step wrong to the right, if you don't walk down the right corridor usually. So, it's incredible.
Indeed.
Incredible.
Thank you. That's Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator. Now,